So this is my third attempt at this video. I'm tired, but also sometimes it takes a few tries to really try to figure out what I want to say. So I had a crazy day today. I just started trying to drive for Lyft and Uber rideshare, and it was a doozy today. And in part is because I wasn't fully slept. I wasn't well rested. I had a pretty good day the previous day. There's a kind of flow and a grace and a goodness and a stability, uh, clarity there that was not present today. And the main variable, I think, was just the fatigue and the tiredness. It's kind of a scary thing to say on one hand, because you're going to be tired sometimes. And so you don't go out and work. That's not how the world works, unfortunately. But I don't know. I mean, anyways. But yeah, it was a doozy of a day, and so I'm kind of reflecting on that, and there's a few things I want to say, kind of general, big picture things that I think are relevant. You're not going to change this world. This is a world of great confusion. Great confusion. And it's oceanic in scale, the magnitude of it. And that scale, that magnitude relative to you is a little bit like an ant to the ocean. You know, the ant is not going to be able to drink down the ocean. It's an absurd thing to even contemplate. And so, given that fact that we find ourselves in this merry realm here, what is the path? What does the path look like? And so much of the path is, in one sense, is about wise choice. Because confusion, drama, pain, suffering, as you heal, you more and more recognize that the further, let's see, how do I want to say this? You more and more recognize that disengagement, non-engagement, non-participation with madness is 90% of the battle, and will profoundly protect and benefit your life profoundly. And now, what does that look like in practical terms? Avoid vexatious, dramatic, confused people. It's not a judgment in that sense about any person individually, but you just recognize, having ridden that merry-go-round enough, the futility of it, that your satisfaction is not in relationship. I know it's a shocking thing, hard thing to hear. Ultimately, it does not lie in another person. Not that you can't have satisfying and healthy relationships with people, but that's not primary. And in some sense, I almost want to say that's a reflection of a living out of a more healed consciousness, a more healed heart. Your satisfaction is not in a cigarette, at least not the satisfaction that sustains, your spirit, that fills your spirit, that heals. It's not coming from a cigarette. It's not coming from a joint. It's not coming from the internet. It's not coming from porn. It's not coming from social media. It's not coming from a relationship. It's not coming from work. It's not coming from food. It's not an outside in type of thing. I mean, there's more to say, more nuance in it, but let's just say it that way to start out. So that's basically the truth. And those are surrogates in a sense. And you realize your own complicity in your suffering, and so much of it, not all of it, but a lot of it. And that is good news. That is empowering news if you hear that rightly. It's a hard one to hear because we don't want to be accountable. Now, that can swing too far in the other direction where you become overly accountable. Some of us on the path have that problem. But let's just say the majority of people, majority of the time, there's so much that you can do to dramatically change your life. If any dimension that we're talking about. Food. Just some very basic, simple changes. Obvious, easy changes that require self-control, self-discipline. That's the cost, to make these changes. The benefits, are many, manifold. Many, many benefits. But that one as an example, I mean, that's like one of those fundamental things. It's like you can become very sick off of the diet that you eat and then try to address all the symptoms that you experience, down the road. But there were 100 different decisions that got you there. That's not a condemnatory thing. I mean, it could be a good wake-up call. But the further back in that chain of decision-making you go, the greater the transformation and impact in your life. Just recognizing, what am I putting into my body? Rather than trying to address the symptoms of an ill body with medication, etc. Let's start at a more fundamental level. So that's just one example. But, getting into a relationship, if you've gotten into a relationship with a crazy person, that's going to have implications for your life, right? And so the fundamental decision there is stop getting into relationships with crazy people. And you'd be amazed how dramatically that benefits your life. Right? I mean, that isn't that obvious? But again, in order to do that, you yourself have to be a little bit healthier, because our relationships and what we attract into our life, the inputs of our life, are a reflection on one level, you could say, of where we're at internally. Now, we don't want to overstate that, and we don't want to get too lost in that way of thinking, but just at a very commonsensical level, the higher quality your inner state is, the more healed you are, the less divided, the less needy, the less desperate. We're desperate and needy in direct relationship to our inner pain, because we're looking for medicine. We think we're going to find it in the relationship, in the cigarette, in whatever, acquisition, more of something that is going to end the pain. But you're operating at a very superficial level. The pain is actually on a deeper level, and the way to transform it is not cosmetically, just working on the surface. It's going into the root, going into the deeper levels, the energetic level, ultimately, of the pain, touching into it, feeling, surrendering, not running, not distracting. I mean, that's really the bottom line there. And the more and more you move in that direction, the more and more capacity you have, the more and more you extract yourself from all of that, the more and more choice opens up for you, the more and more capacity you have to recognize distortion and confusion as it comes, because you've cleared it out of yourself. You've processed it out, and you found a new baseline. And you're less likely over time, this is gradual, over time you may notice you're less likely not only to not have that kind of confusion and drama and chaos in your life, but to recognize when it's coming at you. It's almost like life is saying, here's an option. I'm thinking of this Uber app. Here's a ride. Do you want to take this ride? Let me see. The rider has a 2-star rating. I've had experiences with 2-star people. They've not been good experiences, but let's see what else here. You're getting paid pennies on the dollar, and the mileage is incredibly high. And it's in a really rough neighborhood. And it's at 2 a.m. Is that the ride that I want to take? And see, from a more healed mind, there's more capacity to kind of analyze and to kind of look at that and to reflect on, what that experience is going to be like, having walked down that path more times than you should have. And so maybe this time you say, what is it you say? Can't remember what the app says, dismiss, or whatever the opposite of reject, whatever the opposite of accept is. You don't take that ride. And that choice point is so critical, because you've just saved yourself, depending on what the context is here. Let's say it's a cigarette, and, taking that cigarette after you've done the healing work to become unaddicted is going to open you back up into addiction, and you're going to become unhealthy, and you're going to spend tons of money, and, you're going to smell bad. And there's just going to be this whole cascade of, it's going to get you more and more entrenched in your own confusion and pain. And that addiction is just going to tighten its grip on you. And so you're looking down the barrel of that when the cigarette gets offered to you. And it's like this horizon opens up. It's like, is that the direction I want to head? And at some point, blessedly, at some point, because of your own surrender, at some point, because of your own pain that you've worked with and transformed, and your own unwillingness to go down that, at some point, there can dawn this possibility of saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to take that cigarette. And it was just as simple as saying no. And this whole horizon of madness just dissipates. And you've just saved yourself money, heartache, medical pain, physical pain, suffering, confusion. that was implicated by that choice. And isn't that a beautiful thing? And you just start making wiser and wiser choices. It's like life is just going to keep offering these these choice points, right? If you keep taking it, it's almost like you're feeding the algorithm of the universe. I hate using technological metaphors. They feel so dehumanizing to me, but sometimes, forgive me, they just come through. But there's something similar there. It's something like that. Something like, yeah, anyways. And so you become more and more impeccable and wiser in the choices you make. Again, it goes hand in hand with doing the healing work. The better choices, the more supportive that is of your path and of your healing. The more healed you are, the more capacity you have to choose wisely. So the two things are not disconnected. They're connected. And so, yeah, and so with doing Uber, it's a lot of it, because I could sit here and bitch and complain about the people, and I'm tempted to do that, and I may do some of that here. But you also recognize, I recognize the choice points there that help you to clean up your life and make it so that you are not. Let me see if I can say this another way. So let's just say, what's difficult about Uber and Lyft and most jobs in general, in many jobs, let's just say, that I found is not the actual task. I've said this in other videos. I like working. I like being busy. I like getting out and getting things done. I like that feeling, especially if it's supporting me, financially, etc. Or just, yeah, if it's supportive in some kind of way. But there are a lot of crazy people, let's just say it that way. Confused people, maybe better. Let's just say it that way. Confused people. And with something like Uber, there are many choice points that make it, a better experience for you as a driver. And I'm just using this as one example because it's what's up for me right now. But again, I try to lay out some of the broader principles here that are applicable, in different situations. But one thing is the place in the city and the place wherever you're driving, the place in town. And that's an upfront decision you can make that will just spare you from a ton of, it will help you to avoid things that you never had to get involved in. And that will make your life so much easier. It's just that simple decision before you get, before you're stuck in the middle of chaos. And these are things you have to kind of discover as you go because you get burned and burned and burned time and time again. But it's like for me, just to say it bluntly or concretely, directly, yeah, there are places in the city where I'm just not going to drive. And yeah, as simple as that. And that's just a decision you make for your own mental health, really. It's not to say that every single ride, every single experience there would be super stressful. No. For me, for example, I'm not going into downtown in the city where I live. Part of it is I'm not going to downtown. I'm not going to a couple of other zones that are kind of like right in the thick of the city. Part of it is the construction on the one hand, and the congestion and the traffic and the yeah, I mean yeah, I guess those are the big things. The traffic and the construction can just make it really unpleasant, constantly riding your brake and stop and go and taking a long time to get anywhere and, weird rerouting and detours and stuff. But there's also kind of an energetic thing, the kind of franticness in those areas, the poverty. A lot of these, there's really rough areas in there. And again, it's not like every single experience is going to be that way. You may end up picking up somebody who's very, uh, I mean, there's so many possibilities to find angels, anywhere you go. But when you have so many things to consider, you just kind of develop rules for yourself. And that takes away a lot of the guessing out of the system. You're not going to be right 100% of the time, but you'll be right a lot of the time. And overall, it's just these are general principles that are going to help, safeguard your mental health, your spirit, your safety. And so that's a big one. I'm just not going to drive in these parts of the city. Just flat out, it's a no. If I get a ride in that area, it's a no. I'm just not going to go. It's not worth it. This particular ride, maybe it would have been fine, but I'm not going to do that mental gymnastics and try to figure everything out. It's just a no. The rider rating. As a rider, and here's again, once you get clearer and less divided, things become simpler. I've been a rider. You book the ride, assuming they arrive on time. I'm always there on time, waiting for the car to show up. I get in. I'm respectful. I say, hey, how's it going? Tell them my name so that they know they're picking the right person up or whatever it is. I don't know if I've done that. I think I have, yeah. Yeah, I have. I get in. I put on my seatbelt. And I just get taken to the destination. I just sit there, There's nothing I need other than to be transported. My role, if you want to look at it that way, is so straightforward. Just relax, sit in a car, get to the place. It's really that simple, you know? And so if somebody has, and you get all 5-star ratings, because how much trouble, how much drama are you going to get into on your Uber ride? I mean, you'd be surprised, but it's the most simple, straightforward thing in the world, in a complex, confusing world. This is not complex or confusing. Don't be an idiot, be respectful, and just sit there and get to the place you're going. So when you see star ratings, I'm just going to say it pretty extreme, that are below 5, even 4.8, 4.9. I mean, that's probably okay, but you kind of have to wonder, like, how are you getting anything less than 5 stars? Like, you're sitting in a car. Just sit in a car and get to the place that you're going. It's not that complicated. And so that's another thing is like, I'm not going to pick up people. And this, I've learned this just in a few days. Not that it was something to really learn. It's just I didn't know that to pay attention when the offers came in. I could see the drivers or the rider, their rating. And so, yeah, I mean, anything below like a 4.8, I'm probably not going to pick them up. And again, I'm running the risk of being, you know, it could very well be that the person that has 4.7 rating, just there was some very reasonable explanation. Maybe the driver was insane or who knows. But, and again, part of this, there's parameters here too around choosiness, because it's like, what can you get away with? How much choice can you get away with expressing in a certain environment? And I'm still able to get a lot of writers. If for some reason I was doing this and there wasn't enough supply, that choosiness, I'd have to reconfigure that. It's all relative to, there's other considerations here, obviously. If I was filtering such that it meant I only got one ride a day, then yeah, I'm going to have to adapt. But anyways, and I'm still experimenting with and figuring out what my parameters are, but yeah, I'm just trying to express, in this specific instance, how you can start to tailor and customize, and there's upfront choices that you can make that make the path easier and make the experience easier. Not every time, it's not a guarantee of anything, but over time, it can dramatically shift the quality, the overall quality of your life. Excuse me, my back's kind of uncomfortable right now. So yeah, where in the city is it? And actually I found out, because I had that preference and I looked into it, the apps themselves do allow you to kind of limit the areas that you're going to be driving in. Not perfectly, and I wish it was a little bit better, but it's something, right? It's something in the direction of a healthier experience. So you take advantage of that. Star rating of the rider. And these are all ways upstream that you make a wiser decision, and it forecloses the horizons of all the chaos that may have ensued. You've chosen a better path, and you've spared yourself a lot of heartache. And you can lose sight of that. The more skillful you get, you can lose sight of, well, things could be a hell of a lot worse, but it's because I've built healthier habits and I'm making wiser choices that they're not. But it's good to kind of check in and recognize that. When you're feeling frustrated, it's like, no, I'm still messing up on things, but I've made a lot of wise decisions that have helped to insulate and kind of a buffer, and protection in my life. It's helpful for me to recognize that. I had a really messed up ride today, and so I'm trying to process that on one level energetically. I'm trying to release a lot of that, and that takes, because of how much I dislike suffering and dislike confusion, dislike addiction, how committed I am to not going down that route of addiction and distraction. It sharpens up my decision making on the front end. It's like I want to do everything I can on the front end to make it so that at the end of the day, I'm not reeling and totally out of whack and off balance, and I have to do all the work to release and empty out. I want to move through the day in a more skillful way, such that there's a sustainability about it. Not that the world's ever going to be perfect, but you can make choices that make the day a lot better. And so I'm learning through this process, and I'm not locked into anything. At the end of the day, when I lay down, I say, God, show me tonight exactly the step to take. I don't give a damn what it is, what I have to excise from my life, what changes I have to make. As long as I know it's you guiding me, as long as I know it's coming from a true place, that's all I care about, and I will do it. But that clarity can be kind of hard to come by, but I guess I'm just saying nothing, I'm not locked into anything here, but, I'm exploring, and, But yeah, so I start out the day not really well slept, and that I think played a major role in events, but I also just had some really uh, bad, not good interactions, and so I'm sort of sifting through all that. Like I said, releasing, processing, trying to figure out what were those decision points that could have made a difference. And so it's like I'm kind of sifting through all that data. And one thing that I almost want to give advice to Uber drivers, Uber drivers, yeah, Lyft drivers, on the off chance anybody would watch this. But anyways, let me just not forget that. Let me just say one thing that. So yeah, I had this really difficult passenger, whatever, and I'm looking back through that, like, where could I have taken a different step that would have made this a less difficult experience, that I'd be carrying less from it. And there are things that I noticed. I got a text from this person before, on en route, however you say that, en route to pick this person up. That has never happened. Um, and it was about something about saying I have to be at this place by a specific time. Now, I took that ride. It was a very, relatively speaking, high paid ride, and that was part of why I took it. But I I did everything right in this particular scenario, in the sense that accepted the ride, and I just right away took off driving in that direction. And so I'm getting this text from somebody talking about there's a time crunch that they need to get to somewhere. It's like, that has nothing to do with me. That should have been the first. It did register a little bit, but again, I wasn't fully with it, and there's still some novelty in all this, and I don't know, I don't want to crush myself under self-criticism here, but that was the first thing, and it did register as a bit of a red flag, because I'm driving out there. Again, it'd be one thing if I was like, I got accepted the ride and then was just waiting around for 5 minutes, stretching or getting a bite to eat or something, and then driving out. And I've seen drivers. The thing is, you can see on the app as a passenger, you can see where they are, and you can see if their car's making progress, and all those things. And so I'm already sensing like this guy is impatient, and he's saying that because it was like a, I don't know, 10 or 15 minute drive for me to get there, but that's just because that was the route. I mean, that was the offer. That's how, and this guy was way out of town, kind of on the edge of town. Um, and sometimes that's just, you accept an offer and you're quite a ways away from it. That's just the reality. And so, anyways, but from my perspective, I just took the ride that was offered, started driving. I'd done nothing wrong. So already, just to get that text about, I got to be somewhere, there's a kind of impatience implied there. You can't 100% ever say what's going on in somebody's mind, but that should have been a bigger red flag for me. And in the future, it's kind of hard because life rarely gives you cleanly, you learn a lesson and you're like, okay, let me see that one again. No, life will just throw you some other bullshit curveball, But anyways, that is getting a text like that should have been a bigger red flag. It did register, but for some reason I just kept going. I think in the future, at that point, running the risk that I may be wrong, if I were to get that again, I would just cancel. A part of what was going on for me is because it was a pretty high paying fare. And money is I'd like to make some more money, obviously. But man, it was not worth it because that was just a preview of things to come with this ride. And the thing is, if had I canceled there, I would have, kind of gone out of zone. I was driving on the highway for a little while, so it would have taken me a little bit of time to get back to, a good place to be. But I may have picked up a ride that would have gotten me back there, or worst case scenario, 10, 15-minute drive back. And I'm sure I would have found somebody else, I would have lost that fare potentially, but man, it would have been a much better outcome. And so that's something I can do in the future is like, if I'm getting texts from them before I even get there, and they're anything less than very reasonable, understandable, kind, respectful, I can't even think of a scenario why. I guess somebody could text and say, I'm not even sure what would be a reasonable request at that point. Again, it's just so easy to be a passenger. Just book it, stand there, get in the car, go to the destination, guys. Can we get that straight? I mean, this is not rocket science. But maybe there would be some reasonable thing where I got a text and they were respectful. I was like, okay, that makes sense. But this was not that. And in the future, I'm just going to be much quicker to cancel. Not even do the investigative work. So that was a decision point that would have just spared me so much heartache and pain and made the day so much better. Didn't happen. So it was like there was that opportunity then and there. And the next thing, I pull up and it's kind of a sketchy area. So there's another piece of data. I think it's a like shitty old, budget hotel or something. I'm not sure. I don't really remember. But the vibe of it is just, kind of sketchy. Then I see this guy, untidy would be one way to say it, smoking a cigarette. The body length, he's sitting on the curb smoking a cigarette, kind of hunched over, not really like making eye contact with the car. Just the whole vibe of it. Look, he's a heavy set guy carrying a big backpack, like untidy. It's one way to say it. Not well groomed. And again, you have to do some profiling. Well, I don't know if I want to say it that way. It's like these are all points of data that you're taking on board, right? So we got that text that seemed totally out of place. It had nothing to do with me. I was doing everything as best as I could. I should have been more clear about that. Because I'm not going to take on some time crunch. I'm just going to do the best I can, and I'm going to drive safely. It's not going to be effective for you to tell me, hurry up or this or that. I know that I'm just doing it as efficiently as possible, and I'm probably more efficient than most people. So that message has nothing to do with me. But then, yeah, the environment, this guy out there smoking cigarettes, like, I don't really want a guy who's just smoked a cigarette in my car, because of the smell, but then the overall appearance. And so then and there was another decision point, and this is how I would choose now. I would see that scenario, and I would just drive right past him and right out of the parking lot and right back, in the other direction. And I would just cancel it. Running the risk that he may have been a total sweetheart and very respectful and humble, and just, who knows, maybe there's some reasonable explanation. But I'm just not going to run that risk. I'm not going to run that game because, after you've been burned enough, or even once with something like this, but it's just not worth it, And you run the risk of inconveniencing that person, but my mental health, my safety, protection of my car, etc., not worth it. But I didn't do that. And so I pulled up, Guy opens the door and he just chucks in his drink. It's a bottle, like a Powerade or something, so it's got a lid on, but he just chucks it onto the seat. That should have been another point, where if somehow they got past those filters and I got to that point, at that point, it would have been better to say, my friend, we're not going to be throwing drinks into my car. It's going to be a respectful ride, or it's just not going to be a ride. That would have been another point to stop it. And I did not. Yeah, I did not. I did say something. I said, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to put this in the center panel. But I'd like to be more direct, and I'd like to have been more direct, actually. Again, part of it was the pressure on me about making money, and that's something I can let go of. I feel that's an easy thing. That's an easy change for me. Again, it's like, what changes can I make? It was wrong for this guy to act that way. You don't treat other people that way. You don't, I guess maybe I was thinking, is this guy like mentally handicapped and just doesn't understand? I mean, there are people out there who just are not developed sometimes, and they do. He's kind of overweight, and maybe he's just, I don't know. I don't know exactly what I was thinking, but I didn't act how I would have wanted to. With starting out throwing this thing in before he said anything or whatever. And he's getting in the front seat, and that was another red flag. People never get in the front seat in Uber and Lyft. They always get in the back. And I say that, I myself actually have gotten in the front seat a few times because I don't know if I really understood the protocol around it, but I would have certainly been open to somebody asking me to get in the rear if that was their preference. And now that I've been driving and I see that is kind of the norm, I think maybe I will get in the back next time. I don't know if there's a next time, or I'll at least ask, if there's a preference, or I'll be open to it. And this guy, I'm sure, has driven Uber many times. You get the sense that I'm guessing he doesn't have a car or whatever. Anyways, so he gets in the car. He has this big backpack, which I think left some scratches on the interior of the car. Not 100% sure. They might have been there before, but I'm thinking it may have been caused from... Oh, wow. Camera did something weird. I'm not sure where that cut out. Shit. I don't know how much of that recorded. So anyways, this guy gets in. He awful body odor, really strong. And he's just being disrespectful. He's being rude. All the stuff I've described, and we haven't even really gotten to the ride, but we get into the ride, and he's telling me that he needs to go to the ATM, make an unplanned stop. And to my credit, this is something I did a decent job with. I just said no. I didn't argue with him. I didn't try to, negotiate. I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I wasn't like escalatory or anything. I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he was asking me, can I book with you on the way back? I sort of dodged it first and said, I don't really know how to do that. He said, oh, I know how to do it. And so, I could have been more direct there, but I was trying to process all of this and feeling kind of upset and frustrated and flustered. And so the second time he said it, I realized, that would take me all the way back out to here to drop him off again. So that was a practical, explanation I could give. And that's what I said. I said, no, because that's going to take me way out of zone. Now, I'd like to have probably been more direct. It's hard when somebody's in the car because you don't know what kind of crazy person you've got right next to you. And my consideration at that point is more about I don't want him to damage the car. When somebody flips their shit, you don't know what they're going to do. He's got this drink. Is he going to pour it out? Is he going to get violent with the car, scratch things up even more? I think he probably did a little bit, but you just don't know what kind of petty, shitty stuff somebody's going to do. Unfortunately, right? It's like, man, this world is just, it's crazy. It's a crazy world. And so there's a way in which you, anyways, yeah, so potentially I could have been more direct there and just said, at this point, I don't feel comfortable giving you a ride back. But you say something like that, and this was a long ride, so you got the next 17, 20 minutes next to this really angry guy, potentially pissed off guy. But yeah, he kept insisting after I said, no, I'm not going to do that. He kept saying, yeah, no, you could just give me a ride back. It would just be an easy thing to do. At that point, I did a pretty good job. I just didn't respond to him. I didn't feed into it. I had said no. There was nothing more I needed to say. I'm not going to have a back and forth and a negotiation. I went, what is that, gray rock? I forget the term, but I just said no, and that was that. And I think I even said at this point, I said, it sounds like you're unhappy with the ride. If you're unhappy, I'm happy to drop you off here and we'll just cancel the ride and you can get somebody else. That quieted him down pretty quick for a little while. Then he started insisting on something else. He kept bringing up, he kept asking, he would say, so do you have somebody else that you have to pick up? You have something else scheduled? It's like, dude, that is none of your fucking business. I don't owe you an explanation. And so he said something. I said, respectfully, I'm not going to answer that question. You don't owe anybody an explanation. And that was good that I said that, given the situation. And then again, I said, again, I'm happy to drop you off and you can book with somebody else. And at that point, that was pretty much the end of that. And I drove him all the way there. He got out, didn't say anything, and he kind of slammed the door, and that pissed me off. So I gave him, a bad review, left notes, etc. But so I didn't do the worst job in some ways. I'm trying to have some grace with myself. I'm still figuring everything out, and I was tired, and there's a number of other things that factor in here. And there were some things I did a decent job. I wasn't negotiating with him. I was firm. I just said no. But I would like to have, there's so many red flags, so many steps prior to this where I could have just not engaged with it. In other words, canceled and not have picked him up. And man, that would have spared me so much heartache. So much heartache. And we can use this example and kind of template and some of the general dynamics here and apply it to so many things, right? A very unhealthy job, right? That you sense from the beginning, like, oh, this manager, this would be a nightmare to work for this person. Or this environment just doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel like a good environment, And rather than pushing that aside, and again, it's all contextual, and sometimes God puts us in situations where we have to, I don't know, I mean, there are many considerations here, but yeah, you can recognize a lot of that stuff up front, like let's just say with a job, and how much easier it is to just at that stage say, I'm not going to work here. I'm not going to put myself through this. No, I know I've been through enough. I've seen enough. This manager it seems like an idiot. The employees here just don't seem to give a damn. The environment here, the pay, whatever, there's different things that you do your due diligence up front and you make the right choice up front. rather than getting in there, getting involved, getting entangled, and then having to try to extract yourself, which, that happens too, and that's fine if that's what the path is right now. Got to extract yourself from a lot of the stuff that we're involved in. But it gets cleaner the more, you know, you extract and then just choose to not engage, not get involved with stuff. It saves you a lot of time. It forecloses a lot of the painful horizons that might otherwise open up. Or with a relationship. This person, there's a bunch of red flags at the beginning of the relationship, but your desire for connection and for the the seeming medicine of physical intimacy or whatever it is that's driving you, such that you jump into the relationship anyways, and lo and behold, it's a total shit show, total nightmare. I've been there for sure. But rather than calling, rather than getting into a relationship with a crazy drunk woman you met at the bar, there were 100 steps before you got 2 years into a crazy relationship, and it's destroyed your whole world. It's like maybe at the point of the first date, when a lot of the red flags that you sensed were confirmed. Wow, she's just dumping drama, all throughout this date, doesn't care about this, anything else, it seems, just wants to dump and dump. Or I don't know. That actually has not really been my experience. This one's a little bit more hypothetical. It's not that far-fetched, though. But so, yeah, that could have been a point where it's like after the first date, done. You've just saved yourself 2 years of madness. If you look at it that way. Or let's step back a step further. This kind of maybe attractive but chaotic looking woman on a drunken night at a bar that you talk to gives you her phone number. Maybe you reflect on the moment, you reflect on where you were at that night, where she was at, and you think, I'm just going to throw this phone number away. You've saved yourself the 2 years of madness, and you've spared yourself from that crazy date that you would have gone on. You could step even further back from that. She offers you her number. I don't know if this is the kind of person I'd like to get involved with. I'm not going to take the number. Maybe I'm at the bar because I'm drinking, because I am really confused myself and in pain. So I'm going to drink less tonight. I'm going to go home earlier. I'm going to stay sober tonight. And so you were never drunk to be vibing with a crazy drunk person. So that's a step back where you've saved yourself all that heartache. And you could take a step further back. It's like, do I really want to go to bars? Maybe I'm going to get a good night's sleep and next day go to the gym, next day work out, next day, do something creative, next day work hard and get some money. And I'm just going to stop going to bars, stop drinking. So it's like, how early can you interrupt that chain of unhealthiness? It's, the further back gets, the less you get involved with stuff. And that's kind of a principle here too. Now again, have grace for yourself, because even if you are really discerning, sometimes you just get, a curveball or something crazy happens. But the earlier you can intervene in that chain of events, the better. And for me, sleeping another hour or just taking the day off. I do need to be working, but it wouldn't have crippled me to take the day off today. Part of me is because I wanted to get out and try it because it's a Saturday and I wanted to see what it was like doing it on a Saturday. And because I'd had a pretty good day the day before. But I knew waking up that it'd be a better day if I was more rested. And so that would have dramatically made things better for me because this was such a rough day today. It really was. There's 5, 6 other interactions that were not so great. Again, you wish it was a better world out there, that it wouldn't matter and that you wouldn't have to be so impeccable in your approach. But that wouldn't be the world we're in. You know? Yeah, it's so. Like it's late now and I should have been asleep a little while ago, but you know, because I'm so unsettled, I've been doing some. Anyways, I don't need to get in all that. Let's see if there's anything else here. Yeah, I mean, this is all kind of just variation, not even variations, these are just kind of more examples of what I'm talking about. It's like I put covers on the back seat, and that's, in the back seats, and that's given me some peace of mind, that well, I'm not stressing it. Anyways, I think I'm done talking. I think I've said enough here. All right, so take care.